son Jonathan's 30th birthday today, I'd like to share this true story with you. The boy who blessed the rabbi. Many people remember it as the day it rained sideways, but I'll always remember it as the day my son blessed a rabbi. When Jonathan was 10 years old, he loved to play soccer and basketball and chess. He also loved to tackle his little brother Joshua. He had so much energy that we often joked that each night when he slept, we had to recharge his battery pack. One spring, as the days got warmer, Jonathan started dropping things. First it was a fork or a book. Then he started slurring his words or kicking his brother under the table, but promised it was an accident. He also complained of a sore throat and headaches. My husband Jacob thought John was watching too much television, while I blamed it on his persistent negotiations to go to sleep later. A visit to the doctor revealed that we were both wrong. Jonathan had rheumatic fever. Suddenly, things got really bad very quickly. Jonathan had no energy to sit up or stay awake for long periods of time. It was hard for him to speak clearly, hold a cup, or walk from his bed or the couch to the washroom without the help of a grown-up. I slept in his bed to massage his tired limbs and help him go back to sleep after severe cramps woke him throughout the night. Instead of running to school, playing with friends, and enjoying his favorite sports, he spent all of his time sleeping or going to different doctors and specialists. Joshua was upset because he missed playing with his older brother. He also missed spending time with me and Jacob, who were pretty busy taking care of Jonathan all of the time. Jonathan missed school, especially recess and math, lunchtime, and the bus ride. But most of all, he missed his friends. One day, Jacob got a call from a friend saying she made an appointment with a rabbi from a family of Kabbalistic healers who was coming to New York City all the way from France. Earlier that day, a neighbor had come to my office and offered to make an appointment with a special rabbi who was considered an energy healer, visiting from far away. That night at dinner, both of us were excited to share the news. We thought it was beshert, which means meant to be, that two different people had reached out, offering to connect our son to the same rabbi who was arriving in New York City in a few days' time. It was raining sideways on the morning of the appointment. Jonathan was too weak to stand around waiting for a taxi, so my mother drove to our apartment building to navigate the 3-mile drive through Central Park. I got into the car and Jacob helped Jonathan ease into the back seat. I closed his seatbelt. This scene reminded me of the many times my parents sped off to doctor's offices or hospitals when my younger brother Gary was having trouble breathing due to serious childhood asthma. Except this time I was the grown-up. Now I was the one who had to keep it together for the sake of my child. The pounding rain was blowing people's umbrellas inside out as they pushed through the storm. Inside the coziness of the car, my mother wanted to lift Jonathan's spirits and welcomed us with the following greeting: "Grandma's taxi service at your service." Jonathan smiled, even though he was quiet. It took a lot of energy for him to leave the apartment, and he was exhausted before we even embarked on the outing. We came to a tree-lined street and got out in front of a beautiful brownstone. A steep flight of broad steps took a long time for Jonathan to navigate. I held him up by supporting him under his arms while Jacob attempted to keep the umbrella over us so that we would not get completely drenched. Inside the brownstone, a long corridor was filled with dozens of people waiting for a private audience with the rabbi. There was one empty seat, and I helped Jonathan sit down. A tall gentleman with an elaborate mustache stood up and motioned to his chair so that I could sit next to my son. "That's very kind of you," I said in a low voice. He smiled. "It's my pleasure." Jonathan leaned into me and closed his eyes. Scanning the length of the hallway, I noticed he was the only child. Just like the pediatric cardiology waiting room, no one was looking at other people. And just like the pediatric neurology waiting room, everyone seemed to be deflated and sad. When people saw Jonathan lying across my lap, they nodded their heads. I felt their empathy and tenderness. All around us, People were whispering in hushed tones or praying for a miracle to happen to them or their relatives. After an hour, a man with a large black hat opened the door and motioned to us to come inside an office. The man had a twinkle in his eyes and a kind face. Once he ushered us inside the room, he closed the door. The rabbi sat behind a large table. He had a radiant, sweet smile on his face and motioned for Jonathan to come closer. He placed both of his hands on top of Jonathan's head and started swaying back and forth while reciting the blessing with his eyes closed. Then he handed him a piece of paper with a written blessing. Jonathan sat down between Jacob and me. The rabbi looked at the three of us. "Is there anything else?" Jonathan and I quickly exchanged glances, and Jonathan nodded to me, so I began. "Yes, Rabbi, there's one more thing. Last night when Jonathan was going to sleep, we were talking about our visit today, what to expect and what would it be like. I told him that hundreds of people come from all over the world to meet with you to get a blessing. Then he asked me, 'Who blesses the rabbi?' I told him that God blesses you. He said that he didn't think it was right for you to bless him without him giving you a blessing in return. Then he said his prayers and went to sleep. Now he would like to give you a blessing." The rabbi's eyes opened a little wider and his countenance glowed as he gently motioned for Jonathan to come closer. Jonathan stood up and placed his hands right in the middle of the rabbi's hat as both of them lowered their heads and closed their eyes. When Jonathan finished his blessing, the rabbi embraced him, and the visit was over. When we got back to the apartment, Jonathan took a nap. Later that night, when I tucked him in, I asked him what he thought about the visit. He nodded his head and said, "It makes me feel good to have a blessing and to know that people care about me." I stroked his blonde curls and told him how much I loved him. "What did you say in your blessing, Jonathan?" Jonathan looked up with his big blue eyes and said, "I'm sorry, Mommy. I can't tell you my blessing. It's between me and God." Today, my son Jonathan enjoys good health. Every day is a blessing. Sometimes we're just too busy to appreciate it. Here are some soaring words, soaring into strength, positive health prompts for you to think about. During these times of physical distancing, we can get inspired from other people. Think of a time when you did something kind for someone else. You can write about it or journal about it. Think of a situation when someone did something kind and considerate for you. Why not reach out and thank this person? Sometimes we feel we'd rather stay in bed under the covers. One of the best ways to minimize a sense of isolation or despair is to do something kind or altruistic for another person. That's why we built a Soaring Words Pay It Forward action into all of our programs. You're invited to go to soaringwords.org and invent a soaring bed message and artwork to donate to a hospitalized child. Your drawing and message will inspire an ill child and end up making you feel pretty wonderful yourself. Soaring Words is the power to heal.